Hello learners, welcome to this course on preparation of research proposal in social sciences. I am Dr. Pratik Chaurasia, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Education, Banaras Hindu University. Today we are going to discuss our lecture number 28, which is based on understanding the concept of population and its significance. Key learning themes for today's lecture: what is population in research, types of population, importance of population in research, example of population, challenges in defining population and defining population effectively. In the previous lectures, we have discussed about the various aspects and components of preparing a research proposal, like how you will prepare your research question, how you will prepare your research objective, how you will prepare your hypothesis. But today we are going to discuss one very important component of your research proposal, that how you will understand and define population of your study. So let us begin. First of all, let us discuss what is population in research. You can see here on the screen, a population refers to the entire group of individuals, items or data that a researcher is interested in studying. It forms sample target audience for research. Let us take one example. All secondary school teachers in India teaching science in government school. You can clearly see on the screen that whatever is being written there, basically it focuses over defining that what is population, and you can see here how population contained the sample within. So it is very important for a researcher to understand that what basically population is. And when you see in a very deep in manner, then population generally refers to the whole coverage on which you are focusing to do some certain kind of a research. For example, you can see here all secondary school teachers in India are teaching science in government school, and in a figure also you can see it's a bigger circle which seems to represent population, and within that one smaller circle is there that is represented by dotted circle that represents sample of a study. Types of population: target population and accessible population. The entire group a researcher wants to understand or generalize to. Here it is very important to understand for a researcher that what is the basic difference between target population and accessible population. You can see here a target population is a population that is the entire group a researcher wants to understand or generalize to. One example is here: all pre-service teachers in teacher training college in India. Here you can see we are considering the whole group, we are considering the whole existing group of something which we are going to look into that. For example, we are looking into the all pre-service teachers in colleges in India. On the other hand, let us see what is accessible population. The part of the target population that the researcher can realistically assess. Here we have to understand one very important thing while we look into the population, that it is important to understand that how you will take your research further with a sense of understanding and defining your population exactly. Here exactly means you can see and look towards various kinds of population in your research, but do you can take it counter to the side that yes, I can collect the data from that population, that you have to see. And when we talk about this accessible population, that focuses on that particular point, the part of the target population that the researcher can realistically access. Example: pre-service teachers in XYZ and ABC university. Here's the example that any pre-service teachers studying in any universities, so it is more specific, so which is more directly accessible to the researcher. Importance of population in research. Now this is also very important to understand that as a researcher, how you will understand and how you will define your population and understand its importance. So let us see here. It determines the scope and generalizability of the finding. Second, it guides the sampling technique and sample size. ensures relevance and ethical consideration, example, inclusivity or consent. And last is prevent sampling bias and improves the quality of data collected. Here you can see whatever the point we have discussed, they basically reflects the importance of population with respect to overall research, with respect to comprehensiveness of the research. And any research whatever you are going to take is highly dependent upon your population and sample, because at the last these are the things over which you are going to make some predictions, which on the basis of that you are going to make some generalizations over existing population and sample. So here you can see it determines the scope and generalizability of finding. Whatever finding you will have in your research, it determines the scope, that how you will take to this. It determines the generalizability of the finding, that over which and what kind of a population on sample you are going to generalize your findings. It guides the sampling techniques and sample size. Very important. What kind of a sample you are going to select, what kind of a sampling technique you are going to select, population is going to guide you, help you, because ultimately population contains the sample within. So whatever population you are selecting, you are actually going to take sample out of it. Therefore it becomes very important to understand and define your population in a research, so that you can make your sampling technique and select sample out of it. Third is it ensures relevance and ethical consideration. Very important. Whatever you have selected, whatever you are trying to select, or whatever population you are targeting, whatever sample you are targeting, your sample provides the ethical relevance and consideration to it, that whatever you are going to take, will it have some sense of inclusivity, whether you can take consent or not. There are many factors that a researcher have to look into, the aspects where you are going to select your sample, and ultimately you have to look towards your population. Next is it prevents sampling bias and improves the quality of data collected. Ultimately, as a researcher, whatever you are going to do, you are going to do over some certain selected sample in your research. And in a research, that is why your population matters. The way you select your population, it will minimize or it will support you in terms of getting more closer to your exact sample which you are designed to take. Therefore it prevents you with sampling bias and improves the quality of data collected. Key point is here, a poorly defined population leads to flawed research result. This is very important, because you may have very good objective, you may have designed a very good hypothesis, you may have selected a very good research design, but over whom you are going to implement it, that is ultimately your sample and population which you are targeting. So if you are not able to select your population and define sample exactly, then definitely your research will lead to misguided aspects which will not be considered as a research finding, because what you have designed and what you are trying to articulate and do is highly dependent over your population and sample. Let us see some examples of population. You can see here context, target population and research focus. I have divided this context into three different aspects. First is primary education, second is higher education, and third is inclusive education. So let us see target population for primary education. All students in grade 4 in CBSE schools. Research focus, language acquisition levels. Higher education, target population you can see, first year engineering student. Research focus, attitude towards online learning. Inclusive education, target population, students with visual impairment in secondary schools, and research focus is accessibility of learning material. Here in this example you can see there are different kinds of research problems that has been focused, research focus is there, and along with that what will be the target population of that particular research is being highlighted here. And it is clearly, you can see that how we define the target population in some certain kind of a research focus. For example, when we are looking toward accessibility of learning materials towards visually impaired students, our target population is students with visual impairment in secondary schools. Challenges in defining population: overgeneralization, exclusion, access limitation, and ethical concerns. To select population as well as sample, there are some certain kinds of issue and challenges that a researcher faces while going to the making it possible in terms of collecting data or whatever you are going to do in your research. Selecting your population and ultimately collecting data from that concerned sample is an important aspect, and this important aspect has to be taken care very importantly, and there are some major challenges that you can see on the screen that a researcher tends to face while selecting sample and defining the population. So first of all, we'll discuss this overgeneralization. This is very important and a serious aspect of defining population. Too broad definitions reduces precision and focus. Very important. Whenever you are going to define your population, it is always recommended that do not make very broad definitions, because the moment you make a very broad definition, it becomes difficult to articulate it accurately and have a focus over that. Therefore, try to avoid overgeneralization while you define your population. Next is exclusion. Ignoring subgroups, rural, tribers, learners, special needs, limits the inclusivity. Here, it's a very important thing where the role of researchers and review of literatures comes into the play, that whenever you are going to select some certain kind of a sample or when you are defining your population, it is very important that you are not ignoring any serious subgroups that is being contained within the population. For example, rural tribal learners, if you are doing some research comprehensively, you have to look into this aspect. Special need students, because they limit inclusivity. And the moment you are not able to identify these subgroups properly, ultimately at the last you are going to make issues with your findings, with your research. So it is very important that be focused over this overgeneralizations and exclusion of any important subgroups that has been contained within the population. Next is access limitations. It may not be feasible to reach the full target group. Many a times when you are selecting and defining your population of the study, it makes a sense that whether you can access that population or not. Access in sense, yes, you are defining your population properly, you are understanding your population properly, but whether you will be able to go to collect data or select the sample from that particular population in a practical manner. As a researcher, you have to answer these questions to yourself. The moment you define your population, you have to answer to yourself as a researcher that yes, if I am selecting some certain kind of a population, I can do justice with that, because ultimately you have to select sample out of your population. So whenever you define your population, take into the consideration that yes, how I will be able to collect sample from that particular population. Look into the feasibility, accessibility to that particular population. And last is ethical concerns. There are several kind of ethical concerns related to populations and sample, like consent, anonymity, and cultural sensitivity are key. For example, when you are going to collect some certain kind of a data in an ethnographic research, where you are going to some specific communities to understand and analyze their cultural practices, then it becomes of very prime importance for a researcher to understand various kind of ethical concerns related to some community, that how you will go into that, what will be the consent issues, Will they allow you? If they allow, how you will survive within that, how you will collect the sample out of it, how you will collect the data out of it. There are many aspects that you have to counter. So the moment you define your population, be cautious and take care of these ethical concerns before defining your population. Now, how to define population effectively? You can see here on the screen, there are some important measures. With the help of that, you can define your population effectively. Number one, be specific. Very important and very useful for a researcher to understand that why you have to be very specific in terms of defining your population. Define demographic, geographic and temporal boundaries. It does not mean that you are going to curtail down your research, but as a researcher you have to understand that there are some certain delimitations and limitations that you have to face, and at last you have to define it properly so that you can make justice with your research. Whatever research topic you are taking, you have to make justice with that. So whenever you are going to define your population effectively, be specific in terms of demography, geography and temporal boundaries that you feel that they may appear in front of you when you will go for collecting the data. Be realistic, match with resources and access possibility. This is a very practical suggestion to all the persons, those who are defining their population in a research proposal. Whenever you define your population, you have to be very realistic in terms of matching the things with available resources and access possibilities. What will be the resources you will have, how you will reach to that particular population for identification and collection of your data, and how you will be managing all the things which are related to a researcher in terms of collecting data in the field. So be very realistic. If you are realistic, then you can really define your population effectively, and then definitely you will collect your data effectively and come to some meaningful conclusions. Last is be ethical, avoid stigmatization and ensure representation. That is very important. I have just mentioned also that in a various kind of researches, in a various kind of a research approach, various kind of research design, a researcher has to look into the various aspect of population, sample and data collection, because this is the phase where you actually interact with the subject. This is the phase where you actually interact with the subject, with the problem that you have identified. So this is a phase where a researcher comes into the action in a field in a more practical manner, in a more researcher style, and maximum your data collection competencies are reflected here. So be ethical whenever you are going to define your population, as well as the thing that you are thinking that how I will make my sample and other aspects of the research. Let us take one example here. Instead of all B.Ed student, say B.Ed students enrolled in government teacher education institutes in eastern Uttar Pradesh during 23-24. Here you can see how difference is there between all B.Ed student and a statement which says B.Ed students enrolled in government teacher education institutes in eastern Uttar Pradesh during 2023 to 2024. When you say all B.Ed student, see, it's a very vague term. All B.Ed students of which institution, of which state, of which country? These are the things that makes a very serious question in front of a researcher, that whenever you are defining your population, do not define it in such a way. Be very specific and precise. Concluding discussion for today's lecture. There are some major takeaways for today's lecture that you can see. Defining the right population is foundational for research. Whenever you are moving forward in your research, the stage where you come to define your population requires your competencies, your literature review, your understanding of the topic, and most importantly, demand of the topic, that how your topic is demanded, what your topic is demanding, and in what kind of a sense you are going to move forward. Because population is, I am reminding it again, that population is something over which you are going to execute the things. For example, you will select your sample out of it, and sample over which you are going to do your research. So it is very important, define the population, because it's the foundation of your research. Next is, population affects every subsequent stage: sampling, data collection, and generalization. This is interesting and important for a researcher to understand. ये एक शोधार्थी के लिए बेहद महत्वपूर्ण है ये समझना। आपका पॉपुलेशन जो भी है, उस पॉपुलेशन के आधार पर ही आप सैम्पलिंग करते हैं, आप उसी से सैंपल लेते हैं, आप उसी सैंपल के आधार पर डाटा कलेक्शन करते हैं, और उसी के आधार पर फर्दर जनरलाइजेशन, फर्दर सामान्यीकरण आप करते हैं। ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है एक रिसर्चर के लिए, एक शोधार्थी के लिए, जो भी रिसर्च प्रपोजल बना रहे हैं, कि इस सीक्वेंस को समझना बहुत जरूरी है। Whenever you are going to take your population, it is not only the population you are taking. Whenever you are going to define your population, it's not only you are defining your population, in the hidden style you are defining your sample also, and ultimately it guides you the way you will collect data and what kind of data you are going to take, and most importantly at the last, what kind of generalization over whom you are going to make. सामान्यीकरण किस प्रकार और किस पर होगा, ये भी आपको पॉपुलेशन से ही दिखाई पड़ता है। इसलिए जब भी आप अपने रिसर्च प्रपोजल में पॉपुलेशन को डिफाइन कर रहे हैं, सैम्पलिंग, डाटा कलेक्शन, जनरलाइजेशन, इन तीनों के बैलेंस को समझना पड़ेगा, एंड ट्राई टू डिफाइन योर पॉपुलेशन बिकॉज इट अफेक्ट्स एवरी सब्सिक्वेंट स्टेज। ये सभी को प्रभावित करता है। तो अगर पॉपुलेशन को डिफाइन करने में चूक हो गई, इसका मतलब सैम्पलिंग में भी चूक होगी, डाटा कलेक्शन में भी चूक होगा, और कहीं ना कहीं जनरलाइजेशन में भी चूक होगी। So it's very important for a researcher that look into these aspects, that whenever you are going to define your population, try to address the subsequent stage issues also, which is sampling, data collection, and generalization. And third is, researcher must balance precision, accessibility, and inclusiveness while defining population. Very important. Very important for a researcher to understand that whatever population you are defining, it should not be hypothetical. It should not be hypothetical that you will go and collect so and so data which you feels that I can collect. It's a very important thing. Whatever you feel, you can cross check it by existing review of literature, because as a broad spectrum of research, you will definitely review the related literature of your particular topic and nearby topics. You will study about the variables which you are going to encounter in your research proposals. So whenever you are going to define your population, do not be hypothetical with that. Be very precise and look into two important things, that whether your population will be accessible or not, and if it is accessible, is it really inclusive? Because there may be cases that when you define your population, that population may not be able to serve the requirement of your research. That population may not be important, may not be useful in terms of serving the purpose of your research. Therefore, it is very important to make sure that whatever you are selecting is inclusive in sense of serving and containing the variables of your study. Whatever variable you have taken, it may be case that 2-3 variables you are going to see in your research. So whether the population you are defining will serve you in terms of providing the data which you require, whether it will serve you the data which you are requiring for your research. So you have to look into this aspect, and most importantly, make a balance between these things. It may not be the case that you are selecting a population which is very easily available to you. I'm just recommending this, that look into this aspect, that whenever you are selecting any population, it should not be so convenient also. Yes, if research demand, you are definitely allowed to do that, but it need not be the case that you are simply selecting some population because it's very convenient to you, because there is a serious threat when you select and define your population like this. It may not serve the purpose of your research. It may not support the research objective that you have defined. You may not able to test your hypothesis over the data that you have collected, because you have selected population by only the convenience, by accessibility. It's not like that. Therefore, it is highly recommended that whenever you select your population, look into this balance, that whether your population is accessible, whether your population is inclusive in nature. So, these are the important points that keep in mind whenever you are defining your research proposal, as well as when you are writing population in your research proposal, because there are various components, as we have discussed. There are various components in a research proposal that are highly interdependent on each other. Like you can see here, sampling, data collection and generalization, they are interdependent on each other. If you commit a mistake at any stage, for example while defining population, it will create a problem in the other coming stages, in the other components, and ultimately it will affect your research and outcomes of the research. So whenever you are going to make your research proposal, be very sure in terms of defining population properly, because especially when you are asking or preparing a research proposal for grants, when you are preparing research proposal for grants, then the institutions or concerned persons or authorities, they look more cautiously into your population and sample, because that is the thing over which you are going to execute the things. You may have very good research design, but over the sample that you have selected is important. And how sample will come? Ultimately, sample is being selected from the population, and population, the way you define, is very crucial in your research proposal. So whenever you prepare your research proposal, be very particular with defining your population, as well as making a balance, between precision, accessibility and inclusiveness. So this is all from this lecture. Thank you so much.